After all that, here, again on Milliet at last, was the next generation, in the person of Mary. The idea that Mary Mottlebon existed had been a torment to Vera, but in person, in reality, as a living individual, someone on the ground within the general disaster zone, Mary was not bad. No, Mary was good. Mary was what she was, a little girl. A little hard to describe, but Mary Mottlebon was the daughter of a rich banker and a cloned actress, sharing a junk-strewn beach with her crazy, bone-rattling aunt. That was Mary Mottlebon. She had a world, too. Mary was visibly lonely, pitifully eager to win the approval of her overworked, too talkative dad. Mary was also afraid of her aunt, although she very much wanted her aunt to love her and to care about her. That knowledge was painful for Vera, extremely painful. It was a strong, compelling, heart-crushing kind of pain. Pain like that could change a woman's life. Remotely chatting in their lively, distant voices, the father and daughter tossed their big heads. tore the rusty hood from its hinges. She flung the bent metal to shore, and it sailed like a leaf. She put her boot against a submerged door and tore that free as well. She threw it hard enough to skip it across the water. Mary ran down the beach, skipping in glee.
Do it, Vera. Do it, Vera. Do that again.
Montalban hastened after his child, his face the picture of worry. He half dragged Mary away from the wreckage and to a safe distance. A breeze had fallen in. Suddenly, the coffin had a lumpy, ill-proportioned tumble of what seemed to be horses or maybe large pigs. The outside of the fake sarcophagus looked decent, or at least publicly presentable, but the inside of it, that dark stone niche where they dumped the corpse in their sticky paste of muslin, that was rough.